The nuclear club has grown from 1 to 8 nations that we know of, and it is still growing.
With respect to the spread of nuclear weapons among states, we've now seen the dawn of the second nuclear age.
We've stared into the nuclear abyss a number of times. Though most people were unaware, it happened again on a sunny summer day in 1999. As the nation celebrated, President Bill Clinton was called to a secret meeting at Blair House. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan had arrived along with his family early that morning. He urgently sought President Clinton's help. Pakistan and India appeared poised for a nuclear war.
We met in the Oval Office in the morning of July 4th with the President before he went across the street to meet with Prime Minister Sharif.
Carl Inderfirth was Assistant Secretary of State for South Asian Affairs.
The National Security Advisor briefed the President on the latest intelligence that we had, and there was a very disturbing report that Pakistan was preparing its nuclear arsenal for possible deployment.
It was clear that either side might decide to bring nuclear weapons into play. It was further clear to me that the Indians and the Pakistanis, even though they shared the Indian subcontinent, did not know as much about each other's doctrine for use of nuclear power or capacities as we in the Soviet Union had known during the Cold War. What the Pakistanis were always trying to do is to get us involved in mediating the crisis, in effect to create a negotiation in which the Americans would be involved. I think that's what they wanted. But what happened was they were risking a nuclear exchange.
The conflict came to a head in a remote corner of South Asia, near the border of China, where Pakistan and India meet.
Actually, the world was being divided into two groups, the haves and the have-nots. It was a kind of nuclear apartheid. And then we realized that we were isolated, we were unprotected, a nation of 1 billion people. We didn't have a nuclear umbrella. And so, for the sake of our security, we decided to go nuclear.
In 1974, the world was stunned when India detonated its first nuclear bomb. An arms race began in South Asia that continues to this day. It's its own nuclear program in the early 1970s. The arms race reached a critical stage in 1998. Within a period of 2 weeks, both India and Pakistan conducted a series of underground nuclear weapons tests. The streets of both nations were crowded in celebration.
I had a conversation with a Pakistani general once, and he said, when the average Pakistani looks out his door, he sees poverty, he sees filth, he knows the government is corrupt. Basically, we haven't accomplished anything. The only source of light for the Pakistani nation in the last 50 years is we built the bomb. And so, of course, we celebrate that.
It was in the mountains of Kargil in 1999 that the two combatants reached the brink.
So now you got this subcontinent with a fair number of nuclear weapons, with uncertain doctrines for use and somewhat questionable security of the weapons themselves and the materials used to make them. And all of a sudden, we've got this huge crisis. No one had thought through, in my opinion, on the Pakistani side, and maybe not on the Indian side, how much they were increasing the risks to the whole world by precipitating this huge crisis when they're both sitting on nuclear arsenals.
At 1:30 on the afternoon of July 4th, President Clinton and his staff met at Blair House with Pakistan's Prime Minister.
President Clinton raised with Prime Minister Sharif the possibility of this escalating to be a nuclear conflict. He told Prime Minister Sharif that we had information that Pakistan was preparing its nuclear arsenal for possible deployment.
He was shocked, I think. I think he didn't really, he acted to me like he didn't really know for sure that had happened.
It wasn't entirely clear whether he was surprised that President Clinton knew this or whether he was surprised that this fact existed.
Strobe Talbot, President Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, also was at the meeting.
I had the sense that it might have been a combination of the two. That is, that he, Nawaz Sharif, did not know everything going on within his own military.
Unless he's the world's greatest actor, it suggests that there was a command and control problem there, which is what you always worry about with weapons of mass destruction. And I was very, very worried about it. I just thought, you know, the idea that they'd be playing games with the preparation of their missiles, it was terrifying to me.
The atmosphere was extraordinarily tense, particularly on Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's part. He was desperate. He said, if you're talking to me today, if I give in to American pressure, you'll be dealing with a bearded leader of Pakistan, i.e. an Islamic radical, in the future. President Clinton had very little patience for this argument.
My reaction was that I would hate to lose him, but that the United States could not be blackmailed, and the world could not be blackmailed with a decision by Pakistan.
President Clinton was very concerned about the nuclear weapons, but he also had long-standing concerns about Pakistan's support of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and the fact that the Taliban was providing Osama bin Laden safe haven. So President Clinton had a lot of things that he wanted to say to Prime Minister Sharif.
Given the fact that these two countries were nuclear powers, I did not believe that I could in any way, shape, or form be part of reacting to a power play by throwing all these soldiers over the line of control and increasing the risk of nuclear war. And so, therefore, I was going to be put in a position of going to the Indians and saying, because the Pakistanis have done something wrong, we now have to do what they want us to do. I couldn't do that.
President Clinton informed Sharif that he had prepared two separate public statements to be issued to the press that evening. Which one would be released was up to Sharif.
President Clinton said, look, I've got two statements. One will commend you for taking the steps necessary. Two, I will say very directly all of my concerns about Pakistan today, including this crisis, including messing around with nuclear weapons, including bin Laden, the Taliban. I mean, he laid it on pretty heavy with Prime Minister Sharif.
After urgent consultations with his advisors, Sharif agreed to the withdrawal.
I had a cordial and fruitful meeting with President Clinton.
I knew my only real job on the 4th of July was to get Pakistan back across that line of control, under whatever I had to do to get it done, because otherwise we were just out there rolling dice, hoping to goodness that nothing terrible would happen.
But the truce was short-lived. In less than 3 months, Sharif was toppled in a military coup. In December of 2001, terrorists with ties to Pakistan attacked the Indian Parliament in New Delhi. The attack triggered a massive mobilization of troops, almost 1 million soldiers facing off along their shared frontier. Again, the world was on nuclear alert. Concerns about the risk of nuclear war were so great that in the spring of 2002, Western governments notified their citizens to evacuate India at once. After intense diplomatic efforts by the United States and other Western nations, both sides began withdrawing in the fall of 2002. But tensions remain high. The story is far from over.
You have two nations that have rattled their nuclear sabers more than the Soviets and the United States did in the entire course of the Cold War.
Many believe that the ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan presents the greatest likelihood of the world's first exchange of nuclear weapons. It could begin as a conventional war.
Once the conventional war breaks out, the fog of war sets in. Communications break down. what could be perceived as a decapitating attack. A decapitating attack would mean that your nerve center is taken out for some reason, or it is, under attack. And the people who are dispersed with nuclear weapons, they would then say, look, before my weapon goes out, I better use it or lose it.
This is the nightmare that we have. If a demented general takes over the nuclear weapons and decides to use them, well, we have no option but to respond to that.
Some of the systems, weapon systems, they are, quote, nuclear capable warhead, but they may not be carrying out nuclear warheads on them. They may be having a conventional warhead, but it could be perceived by the other side that as if a nuclear strike has already taken place.
We cannot distinguish between a nuclear tipped missile and a missile which doesn't have a nuclear warhead. It means danger. There is no method of verifying. There's not enough time to verify.
Another scenario could be that a conventional attack is taking place and it destroys a nuclear asset on ground. Imagine a Pakistani Air Force trying to attack back in a conventional war and hits an Indian nuclear weapon. For all purposes, India can be construed that a nuclear strike has already taken place on India and India retaliates. Second strike.
What would the consequences be if there were a nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan?
First of all, huge numbers of people would have died directly. Secondly, the nuclear fallout would have been floating around the Indian subcontinent and then to other places in Asia and elsewhere. Thirdly, there would have just been the trauma that nuclear weapons had been used again. And I believe that would have had a devastating effect on world confidence and had unpredictable consequences on those who were in charge of not only nuclear but chemical and biological weapons elsewhere. That is, it could have made it, we could have had a big movement for international disarmament. It could have, but it could equally have been the beginning of a new age of terror, of weapons of mass destruction.
I think both the Pakistanis and we have a responsibility to assure ourselves, not just that some commander cannot use those weapons in the heat of battle, that those weapons cannot fall into the hands of terrorist or extremist groups that then could use them.
Alarming evidence of this frightening possibility already exists.
It became clear that two of the participants in the Pakistani nuclear weapon program had visited on several occasions with bin Laden, who expressed great interest in learning from them how Pakistan had succeeded in acquiring a nuclear weapon. We know, in fact, that many people who were part of Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI, and Pakistan's military had many very close relationships with Al-Qaeda.
I am fearful. Certain catastrophic events are bound to take place, after which there'll be a re-examination of where we are going and where we should be going. We will survive perhaps the next crisis and the crisis after that. But the question is, how many more crises must we survive? And how many more before we don't survive?
Control of nuclear weapons around the world and the materials to make them has been slipping away. Over the past 5 years, we've seen ominous signs of this new reality. North Korea resumes its nuclear weapons program. Iranian agents attempt to acquire bomb materials from the former Soviet state of Kazakhstan. Al-Qaeda shops for nuclear devices while attacking U.S. targets around the world. Iraq expels UN weapons inspectors, prompting new fears of an Iraqi bomb. In Russia, reports of poorly secured nuclear materials and the possibility of them being stolen or sold rise at an alarming rate. This, then, is the legacy of the nuclear age. This is the nightmare.